Today we will be looking over the integration between Alation and Dataiku and describing how this Alation helps data scientists collaborate on their work and also how other users such as business users, analysts, and other data scientists can use Alation to take advantage of that work done in Dataiku. To do this, we'll run through two use cases. First, we'll put on the hat of a data scientist and say that we're looking to find some data, let's say diagnosis-related information, and use our catalog to find what is the best source of data to do our analysis. Then, for our next use case, we will go through and put on the hat of a business user, an analyst, or someone who maybe isn't as tech savvy, and use Alation to determine if there are some Dataiku models or recipes that we can reuse. So for our first use case, I'll start in our Alation environment. This is the Alation data catalog. And if I click on the left-hand panel of this data catalog, I can click on data to see all of the data sources that this instance of Alation is connected to. So clearly there are quite a few places where we can start our analysis. And if we're looking for a data set, in this case, diagnosis-related groups, I can come to our search panel and type in one of those keywords to find our appropriate data set. Let's type in diagnosis, and just by typing in diagnosis, I have a series of results. The first result looks to be a business glossary term, but as I go down, I can see there's some queries and some additional results. Let's just keep typing in our keyword. And now I can see in addition to this business glossary term, I have tables and queries that we could potentially use. But because Alation surfaces the most relevant result, first I'll click on diagnosis-related groups, and I will find a business glossary term that looks like it's been approved by a steward and has some business information that can guide me on how to properly use this data. Looking at the body, I can see that there's quite a few different objects that have related information to diagnosis-related groups, but I'll click on this table to see what is the first results that our stewards have decided we should use for diagnosis-related group information. And this has pointed me to a catalog page for a table. The table is called SumTopDRG. However, Alation has determined that the English name is Summary Top Diagnosis-Related Groups. And I can click through this catalog page to understand additional context about this data. I can see who are the top users based on who is querying the most, querying this data the most. And that could be querying through Alation or querying through another tool, such as Dataiku. As long as their database ID is attached, they'll show up as top users. I can see what columns are most popular, and in this case it looks like DRG is the most popular column. Again, that's based on what users are querying as they query this table. And I can scroll down to see a sample of the data if our admins have decided to sample data. In this case, they've made most of the table available with some columns marked sensitive. As I click through this table, I can understand additional ways to use this table. I can click on columns to see what are all the columns in this data set and rank them by popularity. I can click on filters to understand how this particular data set is sliced and diced based on what columns are being filtered on. In this case, it looks like provider state is far and away the most popular filter. And I can open up the used values section to understand what groupings of values are being filtered on as they filter on this column. So I can click through and see other users are using groupings for the Northeast, groupings for Delaware, maybe even some individual states or some parameters. I can click on the joins section to understand what other tables are used in conjunction with this table. Looks like there is a DRG lookup table that is used most popularly with this table. Can click on the lineage section to understand where this table is going and where this data is coming from. So it looks like there are 3 downstream tables or BI objects from our SumTopDRG table, and this table has 1 object upstream to it. And finally, I can click on the Queries tab, which will show me what other queries other team members are running against this table to help me understand how I could potentially use it and maybe even reuse one of these queries. All of this information is great to understand how this table is being used and who is using it, what are the contexts to use it. But in order to understand whether or not I can trust this table, I'm going to look at the endorsement, warning, and deprecation section of our catalog page. If I expand this, I can see which one of our colleagues have recommended this table for usage. In this case, it looks like about a dozen or so colleagues have gone in and clicked this checkbox to say, yes, this is is the right table to use for analysis. If I maybe don't know all of the people that are on this list, as will frequently happen at large organizations, I can click on one of the user's profiles to get a link as to what are the other objects they've interacted with, so I can get a sense of whether or not they're trustworthy. And in this case, John Thomas looks like he has an expertise of a series of objects, he's a steward of a series of objects, and as I scroll down, I can see what other queries he's written to prove that he's trustworthy. I can also see on our catalog page that one of our colleagues have put up a warning to describe that this table has some PII here. So I will have to refer to this PII compliance glossary term to understand what are the caveats to use this table. Once I'm confident that this is the right table to use and I understand from tabs like the filters and joins tabs how to use this table, I can open this table up into Dataiku by clicking on the Open With button and selecting Dataiku from the dropdown. Alation will then pass the ID of this table to Dataiku. And from here, we can either import as a new dataset, and I can name my dataset, or I can use an already existing dataset that one of our colleagues have created. So in this case, I see that there's one called SumTopDRG. I'll go ahead and use that dataset. And from here, I can perform all my normal Dataiku data science workflows. So to review our first use case, we used Alation to search for a dataset across our enterprise environment, understand how to use that dataset, determine its trustworthiness, and finally push out to Dataiku using our Open With functionality. Let's imagine for our second use case that we are a business user or an analyst or perhaps maybe even a Dataiku data scientist that is just not aware of what's out there in the environment. So I'll pull up another Alation environment. And this one has indexed a separate Dataiku server. So if I click on the left-hand panel, I can see a series of data sources that this particular instance of Alation is connected to. And if I click on articles, I can see the Dataiku article that describes all of the objects that are in the Dataiku environment. Of course, in Alation, our goal is not necessarily to ask your users to traverse hierarchies of various documentation and data sources. So instead, we'll come to the search button and we'll look up a keyword. In this case, let's look up customer information. And I can see the first object that pops up in addition to a series of queries, tables, and articles is an object from the Dataiku environment. This map points to a project that we have indexed from the Dataiku server, which shows us the customer lifetime value project. And as I scroll through this page, I can see a variety of different objects that are represented from Dataiku. Data sources are represented as table catalog pages, which I can click on, and then open up a catalog page that shows me relative information about this Dataiku data source. Additionally, I can see models, and I can see the information for this project. If I click on this project, it will open up another catalog page that will show me the comments of the source of the project and the reports that are within the project, so I can go dig in and drill in deeper to understand what are the different fields and objects that are contained in this recipe. I can scroll down back on my project page further, and I can see that there are the wiki information of this particular project listed on the catalog page. And if there are multiple different wikis for this project, they'll be shown on a list right under the wiki section. In this Wikipedia, I can see that there's a series of buttons that will help me map back to the Dataiku object. So as an example, I can click on the flow object, and this will open up our Dataiku server, and I can see the flow that is supporting this particular project. From here, I can open this, I can share this, I can maybe even watch this if I want to make sure that I'm tracking what are the changes that are happening to this object. And finally, all of the tags and objects that are associated to this Dataiku project will be shown on the right-hand side, so I can understand additional associated projects to this particular one that I'm looking for. We can also click on the Dataiku main article to understand what are all of the projects available in this server environment, so I can do ad hoc exploration if I don't know what a keyword is that I'm looking for. So to review, in this use case, we have come to our Alation catalog. We use the search functionality to find the appropriate project in our Dataiku environment. We understood the sub-objects to that project, and then we opened the appropriate project in Dataiku so we could continue our work and continue our data science work in Dataiku.